Okay, morning guys, how are you? Okay, so I'm going to use the next half an hour to take a run through the mock exam, okay? And I'm going to run through the questions and kind of what I would suggest should be the proposed answers as you're going question by question. What I'm going to do then is probably reiterate a lot of what Declan just mentioned around how to approach the exam and how to approach the questions and just, be in the right frame of mind. And then I'm going to wrap up by giving you some very clear hints on areas to focus on the main day. Okay. So the mock exam, I'm just assuming that everybody has had a chance to run through the mock exam. Like this is not a compulsory part of the course. You don't have to do the mock exam. I have suggested that you would do, just in the interest of getting yourself into that frame of mind. But the MCQs is the first section. So half of your marks will be down to the MCQs. And the recommendation that I would make in terms of how do you approach that, so it's 50 multiple choice questions. 50 multiple choice questions, so they could come from any area of the course. So any of the 4 modules will make up the 50 short questions. What I would suggest to you is between now and the exam day, is that you take the 4 modules and literally reread them again like a book. I would not suggest that you try and memorize them under any circumstances, but I would suggest that you just reread them again, remind yourself of the content. And then what I would also do is go back to your short tests and have a quick run through the short tests that you completed throughout the term, because there will be questions that are on the short test that will come up in the exam as well. So I'll be very straight about that. So that's really the best way, I suppose, to prepare for the MCQ section. So take your time, take it question by question, have a think. Look, it's not the most problematic section. It isn't the most difficult section. It really isn't. And we're not there to catch you out. We're there to just test the basics of what was within the collections. And I can honestly say, I'm looking at all the names in front of me here. You've all done really, really, really well up until now. So there's absolutely no reason why anyone should be concerned around the exam day. Okay, so is that okay? Shall I proceed then with the long questions, or does anybody at this point have any questions that they want to put to me, or shall I just take that silence is happiness?
I'm sorry, I'm going to ask another question, please. I'm not sure if I got. I'm sorry, I'm not sure sections mock test. I only got the one for credit management from Paul.
Okay, so you didn't get the mock
exam. I got your mock exam.
Now, yeah. I did. Did everybody get the mock exam? Everybody else get it?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm getting nods. Yes. Okay, Virginie, I'm going to send it on to you this second. If you guys could just bear with me, because I just want to make sure that everybody, and Virginie, like we can have a separate conversation if necessary as well, okay? I'm just going to forward this on to you right now.
That'd be great, thank you.
Yeah, just so you can follow along there. So that's sent on to you now. But if you need, and that offer stands for everybody, actually. You've got a week now to the exam. If I cover anything here that you're not comfortable bringing up in front of a group, or you want a kind of a one-on-one session or anything like that, I'll be available all week. So you just send me a message afterwards, send me an email, ring my mobile is the best way of getting in contact with me. And I'll happily put time aside for you. It's not, for Declan and I, it's not in our interest to have anybody stressed out going into the exam. And it's not in our interest for anyone to fail. It really is. We want to see you guys passing with distinctions and merits. Okay, so we're going to do our very, very best to get you through it and get you through it happily. So the first question on the mock exam, which you should have now, Virginie, in a minute or two, it's sent over to you, is write a collections letter or a collections email to send to your customers. Explain in detail each element of the letter and how it relates to the guidelines as set out in the notes. Please specify if it's a letter or an email that you've written. So first hint on this question, or this type of question, is give me some context. Even if you need to make up a scenario, or fabricate a scenario, or imagine a scenario, remember a scenario that you dealt with at work, give me a little bit of background on what this letter, what part of your credit management process is this letter at. And then you need to follow the guidelines that would be set out in the notes in terms of how to write a good collections letter. Now, the first thing that I want you to note, and everybody needs to really take this into their minds now, read the question at least twice. Okay, and I know this sounds like we're kind of teaching you to suck eggs now, but it's the mistake that everybody continuously makes within these exams, is that they like write a collections letter or a collections email to send to your customers, explain in detail each element of the letter. They'll write a great collections letter, but then they don't explain it. So you're automatically deducting marks off your score. If you don't break the question down into its relevant components. The first thing you're doing is writing the letter. The second thing you're doing is explaining in detail each element of the letter and how it relates. How does it relate to the guidelines set out in the notes? And then specify whether we're reading a letter or reading an email. Now, does anybody want me to send you an example? Bear with me a second now. The only reason I'm doing this now, I had technical issues before I kicked off here. I've got an example of a really good collections letter, which actually takes in all the guidelines in the module. So you've got three paragraphs to cover. The first paragraph, just pull out my own notes here. So the first paragraph will set out the facts. So how much is owed, how long is it owed, and any other relevant information. So that should be in your first paragraph. The second paragraph then should contain your call to action. So you tell the customer, you're very, very specific with the customer in terms of what you want them to do. So in other words, I need you to pay X amount by such and such a date. So you're giving a call to action there. And then paragraph 3 would be a compelling reason as to why they need to do that. So Mr. So-and-so, you owe 1,500 euros. We require you to pay 1,000 euros at least by such and such a date. If you don't, then the compelling reason would be we will have to stop supply, we will have to stop service. So that's the way all of your collection letters and all your collection emails should be made up. 3 paragraphs. What are the facts? What do you want them to do? And why should they do it? Okay, so those are the 3, very broadly speaking. And to let you know now, all of the information around writing a collection letter is in module 2, and that is on specifically starting on page 34. I'm seeing all those messages, guys. There's absolutely no problem. I've got an example of a letter and I will send it to you all after this session. So there's no problem with that. Perfect. So that's that's the information that you've got then around writing a collections letter. Don't reinvent the wheel on this. This is what you are doing all day, every day. It's your job. So keep reminding yourselves that this is not new to you. It may be something that you've picked up in the notes in terms of refining what you've been doing, but you do this all day, every day. So when you have, time to have a look at this question. Again, module 2, page 34, make sure you've got your 3 paragraphs. What are the facts? What do you need them to do? And why should they do it? Does anybody have any questions on any of that section, or do you need any more information than that? I will send on the example letter. I mean, I could talk all day about these questions, but what I really want to do is, broadly cover how to approach the questions, and then, give you a bit of time to kind of absorb the hints and tips, and then you go and you apply that on exam day. So the next, if there's no questions, I'll stop there for a second and just open the floor if anybody wants to questions or comments. Marion, page 34 is where you'll find all the information on writing a good collections letter or a collections email. So it goes into great detail on in terms of the paragraphs. You should have no more than 2 sentences in a paragraph, no more than 10 words in a sentence. Now guys, I'm not going to go counting words. If this question does come up in the exam, I'm not going to count the number of words in each sentence, but it basically means that you should be very short and sweet in terms of putting your point across to the client. And a good collections letter does not allow for waffle, essentially. Okay, question 2 is give examples of good and bad words and good and bad questions. Explain in your own words the reasons for your answers, and you are encouraged to give examples of words and questions that are not included in the notes. This is a huge component of the exams, and it will show up on your international module as well. Declan has articulated it very, very clearly. We are not testing your memory, okay? We don't want notes regurgitated. certainly use the notes in putting forward your answers, but what we're testing here is your understanding of what you've read and your application of that in the job. So when you're answering a question like the good and bad words, you could very easily copy paste out of the notes. It gives loads of examples, but what good is that? What you need to do is come up with examples yourself and back up your answer with real life examples. And that really puts across to us then that you've understood the materials. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah, I'll be like a broken record by the end of this session, believe me, because I'll keep saying, you know, back up with examples, back up with examples. I remember being told exactly the same thing when I was doing my Leaving Cert. So, you know, the concept is the very, very same. So the good and bad questions, good and bad questions, good and bad words, that section is covered in module 2. I don't have a specific page because it's covered a lot in module 2. So again, this is going to come up if you reread those 4 modules just as a refresher for the MCQs. You're going to come across these bits and pieces as well. So module 2 and module 3, I will tell you straight away, are super important. They are the 2 most important modules in the collections course. So I would try and focus as much as you can on those 2 modules. So in terms of good and bad words, so the rule number 1 in credit management, the word chasing. I'm chasing payment. We do not chase payment. We collect payment. So the idea is you're going to ask that customer to settle up their bill, but you're going to keep that customer happy and keep them as a returning customer. So chasing payment straight away, you've annoyed somebody. It's got a negative connotation. So it's about looking at how you speak to your customers, excuse me, looking at how you speak to your customers and just tweaking your language to turn it from a negative into a positive. So we do not chase payment, we collect payment. So words like bad debts, arrears, delinquency, you know, those types of words bring such a negative connotation to a conversation. So you really need to focus on adding something that has a bit more of a positive spin. So if you put out positivity, the law of attraction, positivity should come back. So instead of saying I'm chasing payment, I'm collecting payment, using those bad debts arrears words, why don't you say, look, I'm looking to keep your account within terms. Okay, so you're actually doing something for that customer. So it's exactly the same thing. You are asking for payment. The reason you're asking for payment is a very positive one. You haven't put, you know, I'm looking to collect payment because you're in arrears. That's really negative, but I'm looking to collect payment to keep your account within terms. It's just having a think about the language that you use and just tweaking it and turning it around. And overall, if you make an effort to do that on each and every call with your clients, it should have, you know, you get better results. So another thing as well, and this was one of Paul Daly's ones, and I just thought it's something that I did and do from time to time as well. And it's terrible, picking up the phone and starting the conversation with, sorry to bother you. That's really, and I know some people do that out of, it's pure habitual, sorry to bother you. If one of you guys call me and say, sorry to bother you, Katrina, you've reminded me, okay, now I'm bothered. You know, you've nearly told me to be annoyed and to be bothered. So that's really something. We're not bothering people. We're doing a job and we've got a super important job to do. Thank you for taking my call. That's a good one, Marion. I mean, they had very little choice, really, didn't they? The phone was picked up. So, but no, sorry to bother you is not, you know, you're actually putting yourself on a back foot straight away by that. So that's a phrase that you should try and eliminate out of your language. When you preface everything with I'm afraid that we haven't received payment, you're apologizing to them because you haven't been paid. You know, it's really, again, have a think about, everybody's got 2 or 3 phrases that they repeat, rinse and repeat on every call, because we've all got our natural styles of language. Think about those types of phrases that you use. Are you over apologetic on calls with customers? Are you automatically putting yourself on a back foot with them just by the language that you're using? And it's something really to think about, not only from the perspective of the exam, but the perspective of life, I suppose. You know, I mean, we're doing a good job. We have an important job to do. So don't degrade that by using the wrong words when you're initially starting a conversation. Also as well, when you're saying sorry to bother you, I'm afraid we haven't received payment, all of those things, they kind of dilute the message that you've got. So the message that you've got is that this customer owes money. So don't forget that, and don't add in unnecessary comments because you feel that you want to make the customer more comfortable. You know, you've got an important job to do. So just making sure that you use positive language, not negative language, but don't degrade your position either by being over apologetic for the fact that they're receiving a phone call. This is an important part of your job. So, you know, give yourself kudos for that. So I'm not going to go into too much more detail on that one now because, you know, we could be here all day talking about good words and bad words. Good questions and bad questions, but the main ethos to remember around this particular question is positivity versus negativity. What, you know, the idea would be when you put out positive vibes into the world, it should come back to you, and that resonates in every part of our lives. You know, if you somebody asks how you are, I'm not too bad. And that's a real Irish thing, actually, isn't it? I'm not too bad. We're never great. We always have something to complain about. You know, the weather is a great one. But, you know, how are you doing, Katrina? Oh, I'm not too bad. You know, it's quite a negative thing. When you really think about it, it's a negative thing. But and actually Declan taught me this a long time ago. He said, you know, I'm great. And even if you're not, you've planted a seed, and it's just about keeping your mood a bit peppier and, you know, being a bit more positive. And I think we could all, you know, we could all do with that a little bit more from time to time. So that's the idea around the good and bad words and good and bad questions. So giving examples, and I suggested this to the last group doing the revision, and they actually, you know, a good few of them actually came back to me afterwards and said that it was really helpful as a tip. You are presumably, most of you will be working for the next week, Monday to Friday, and you've got obviously the exam next Saturday. What I would suggest you do is monitor yourself for the next week in terms of how you're doing your calls and how you're doing your emails. Put this stuff into practice. And if you've got this stuff put into practice already, those are your backup examples for your exam. So you could actually have so much prep work already done. Now, I'm not saying that this specific question will come up in the exam, but something similar is going to. So if you have a really difficult call with a customer this week, jot a few notes down and take it to the exam. Have it in front of you when you're doing the exam. I guarantee there will be an opportunity to use it as an example. So this is not a massive module where there could be any number of things asked. It's actually quite a short module. It's what you do on a day-to-day basis. So if you concentrate on your day-to-day job for the next 5 days, Monday to Friday, but make sure that you're jotting down and noting an email that you sent which you thought was a really good email and you collected payment from, jot it down as an example. So it will actually, you can have half of this prep work done. Because I'm looking at the actual exam here. And there are one out of the 4 questions, 3 of them will require examples. So if you've got examples in different scenarios already kind of noted, then you've got half of the work done. Does that make sense? Or does anyone want to ask any questions around that? You understand what I'm saying? Yeah? Okay. That's, yeah, no, it is like, that's the way I would do it, Marion. And, you know, in terms of, you know, having that's a good tip, because if you're noting down these examples as you go along, number one, you're getting a head start on yourself. But number two, you've actually put your brain into that line of thinking where you're trying to apply the knowledge in the collections module to your day-to-day job. That's the whole idea. And that's the whole idea of the exam. We're testing your understanding of the knowledge. If you're already applying it, there's no question mark that you've learned what you needed to learn. So great. Now, the third question then on the mock exam is explain the importance of listening and the steps you can take to improve this aspect in your calls. Please use examples that you've experienced or witnessed in your working life. So this again has a few parts to this question. We've got explain the importance of listening. So in this section now, you're going to be talking about active listening. So in terms of where you will find the information around this, active listening comes up first in module 2 on page 23. So you've got effective listening and active listening. So 4 main elements of active listening. So it starts with the content. So this deals with the issue, the problem, the objections, the words. So what is the content of what is being said? Active listening, like I'm actually really passionate about this side of things, and I try and bring it into you know, my everyday life as well. The active listening side of things. Has anyone else on this session ever picked up the phone to a customer, and while the customer was talking, or even while you were talking to that customer, you're scrolling through your phone at the same time, or you're looking at a specific page on your laptop? That's not active listening. You're not listening at all. Do you ever find as well, even if you're not distracting yourself like that, do you find that sometimes your mind has skipped on ahead in the conversation, that you're not actively listening? So actively listening is stopping, trying to slow your mind and really focus on what is being said. So the content is the issues, the problems, the objections, and the words that you hear. The next element of active listening would be the feelings. So the feelings behind those words. So are you hearing those words and understanding the feelings that are behind those words? So this is, again, this is page 24 in module 2. The next element then is the process, which is different for each person. So the process would be picking up what is being said by listening to the words that are used. So some people at this point during the process, they need to jot some stuff down in a notepad. They need to type something on the, you know, some keywords that have been said. But the last bit then would be the feedback that you give that customer. So thanks, Mr. Customer. So what I'm understanding from what you've said is you will pay X amount such and such a date, and then we will come back to you on such and such a date for another installment. It is reiterating back to that individual what they have said, which not only strengthens your understanding of what the customer said, but it also promotes agreement that, yes, this is what we've agreed on, and yes, this is what's going to happen. So that all comes down to active listening. So all of those elements work together in conjunction to make you an active listener. Okay, so you know, my 4-year-old child comes over and wants to talk about dinosaurs. I don't even hear it anymore. I'm thinking about what I'm going to cook for dinner. I'm thinking about what, you know, an email that I need to send, or as opposed to actually focusing on him and listening word for word what he wants to say to me. So I think it's something that, as I said, we can take not only into our working lives, but into our personal lives as well, because we're all so busy these days. And I think we've only gotten busier since the pandemic ended, you know, and everybody has a screen in front of them. We're so distracted by social media, bombarded by social media and advertising. It's good to slow the brain down and actually actively listen to the client in terms of what they're saying. So in terms of that question, so you also, again, there's another example. There's another example of where you need to give an example. Okay, so all of the content that you put forward, all of your thoughts and your answers, you need to back them up. If you've thought throughout this week now in your job about different examples, maybe even an example, and I always, in the assignments, if you remember the first assignment that you had, which was 3 good calls or the 3 bad calls that you needed to give examples of, it is wonderful when somebody answers that assignment and they actually turn around and they say, this is where I went wrong. This is the mistake that I made on that particular call. So an example of where it went wrong is as strong as an example of where it went right. Again, you've demonstrated understanding. Okay, so in the active listening, you know, you will need to provide examples. So have a think, you know, if you're studying today, I would assume some of you are, have a think about the past few weeks. You know, everybody has a short list of really tricky customers that they deal with. Note down that short list, come up with your examples, and I guarantee you will find a place to support your answer on the main exam. Does anyone have any questions or comments on any of that now? And is all of that making sense to everybody? Yeah, great. Okay, so the last question then on the mock exam is, what is the best way to deal with a customer who can't pay? Please use examples that you have experienced or witnessed in your working life. So we've got different types of customers, guys. We've got the can't pay, we've got the won't pay, and we've got the shouldn't pay. Okay, so this particular question is focusing on the guys that can't pay. So the typical reasons that you would get from customers who can't pay is they're waiting to be paid by someone else. I know we hear that a lot. Things are a little tight at the moment. I'm under wicked pressure. I'm in negotiations with the bank. Or some of them are as bad as I have no money. I just can't do it at the moment. So really, what is your first stage, or what is your first step with dealing with a customer who can't pay? Genuinely can't pay? Empathy. We are not monsters. We are human beings. We have feelings, and we should have empathy for somebody. So certainly noting and verbalizing empathy, absolutely acknowledge the situation that they're in. So I'm sorry to hear that. That doesn't put you in a less powerful position by saying I'm sorry to hear that. It's actually showing you to be a human being with feelings, and that you are sorry to hear that they're in such a bad situation. But then we need to move on, and we do need to move on to a negotiation stage. So you need to start pushing them forward to a negotiation process, which should be started by getting them to acknowledge what the debt is. So, John, do you accept that you owe €1,000? Let's start, have a starting point, and you need to get them to answer yes to that question. You need to get them to acknowledge the debt. So look, if they accept that, you can move on to the next part of the negotiation. If they don't, then you're stalled at that point. You're going to need to get them to agree to the debt and move the negotiation stages forward. So the negotiation stages then are outlined, I should say, Module 3 on page 40 and 41. There's also a section on negotiation in Module 4. So if negotiation is one of the things that you want to concentrate on, that's where you'll find the information. So the can pay, won't pay, shouldn't pay, those three types of customers, I'd have a look at those, okay? But certainly, like I said, with the can't pay, empathy and then negotiation techniques. So what you need to do is get that customer to a point where you're at the top of the list. When the money comes in, you're at the top of the list and you will be paid first. So in terms of the exam itself, does anyone have any questions on that section? Like, we could literally talk all day about those different types of customers, but I'm going to leave you guys do that yourselves. I'm going to give you a couple of hints here now, and that I've mentioned already, and then I will give you a really good idea of what's coming up in the exam, so you know where to focus. I don't want anyone wasting time. I don't want anyone getting stressed. So I'm going to give you some very good direction in terms of where to focus your efforts. So I would suggest over the weekend now, if you're studying, or over the next week, a couple of things to do. Reread all 4 modules. Okay, reread all 4 modules. Sit down, take it module by module and reread them. And again, to reiterate, you don't need to memorize them. You don't need to learn them by heart. Just reread them. And that's really good prep for your MCQ section. Okay. The next thing then is to have a look at your 4 short tests. Okay, have a look through your 4 short tests in terms of the short tests and the short test questions. Some of those questions will come up in the main exam, or a variation of them. Okay. Over the next week, think like an examiner. Pretend you're an examiner on ICMT collections. You're going to look for examples. Note your good calls. Note your bad calls. And I'm not saying write an essay, just note them down. Note your good calls, bad calls, good letters, bad letters, good emails, bad emails. Have a bank of examples in your head that you can bring on Saturday to the party as such. And that's a really great way of prepping for your exam, because you know in the long questions you're going to be asked for examples. Okay. And to go back to Louise's question actually from earlier on, and Declan actually answered at that stage. Louise, I have no objection whatsoever to you using, and anybody using examples that you used in your assignment and bringing that to the main exam to use as an example. That's absolutely no problem, as long as it backs up the question you're answering. So just to reiterate that again, I have no issue with seeing the same example come up again, as long as it backs up the question that you're answering. That makes sense? Okay. So use examples from everyday life. So those are kind of the bits and pieces that I would suggest, guys. I'm just going to shut up for 2 seconds before I give you the direction on the mock exam, or sorry, the mock exam on the real exam. Has anyone got any questions at this point, or any comments, or do you want me to run through anything else? Is everybody feeling okay about Saturday?
I have one question, but I think that I don't know if we can ask here just because I didn't get. Is that okay to send you the mock exam? Is that still okay? Could I send it to you?
You can send me the mock exam. What I would suggest though, Virginie, is we don't require you to send it back. What you can if you want, and I will certainly take a look at it for you. But I would use it as a working exercise and a working practical exam for your own knowledge more than anything else. But I'm happy to take a look if you want me to. There's absolutely no issue. So entirely up to you. Everybody else happy? Everyone else is just chomping at the bit now, waiting to hear what's coming up in the real exam, is it?
Katrina, can I just ask something? Declan was talking about in the law exam about the 50 multiple choice and that, you know, you'd have to send it back within the hour. But in the collections, there's also the same format. Is there? There's the 50 multiple choice. So do we have to send that back within the hour? Because I didn't hear if he said it for both of them.
Yeah, that is the case, Declan, isn't it? Yeah. The first section comes back within the hour, yeah.
Yes, okay. It does. So you get that at 10 to 1 and you have to return it by 2 o'clock.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I'm talking about the collections module.
Yeah, collections.
That's all at the same time, is it? 1 o'clock?
Yeah. So Law and International is the first one. That'll be from 10 to 12, and then the collections is from 1 to 3.
Lovely. Okay, thank you.
Great. Okay, so I'm nearly finished. I'm going to have a quick run through the real exam and give you some hints and tips. So I'm going to give you a couple of sections to focus on. And bear in mind, guys, it's 4 questions you just need to answer 2. Okay, so it sounds like a lot, but you know, when you're doing it, it's not as bad. I'll reiterate once more. You've got 30 minutes per question. Use 5 minutes to read the question, reread the question, and even note down, you know, what your plan is to answer that question. Okay, concentrate. One of the areas to focus on is in module 2. It would be positive and negative communication. So something similar to what was on the mock exam. Question 2 is one of the following. It's a can't pay, won't pay, shouldn't pay scenario. Question 3 is covered in module 3, and it's all around understanding your customers and relating to your customers. So communication styles and how you adapt. And then question 4, and I'll just give you one word, negotiation. So that is without telling you exactly what to do and exactly what the answer is. Those are the areas to try and focus your efforts on. I see Paul is after logging in there, so it's 1 minute to 11. Any other questions before I finish up? And guys, you've got my number. You pick up the phone if there's. I don't want anybody stressing. Pick up the phone and ask any questions that you might have if you're not comfortable asking them here. Just to, there's a couple of assignments that came in late, and I know somebody is sending an assignment next week. Get any outstanding assignments. I have emailed you separately in relation to those. Guys, those are marks that are there for the taking. Okay, so you know, try and make the effort, get them back. I know one lady in particular now, I didn't have hers, but I have received it now. So I will be, like, I'll have all assignments. They're all corrected and up to date in terms of what I've got so far. Any of them that are still outstanding, I will make an effort to have done within the next few days. So you still have a few days to get any short tests and assignments back to me. So that's it, I think. Unless anybody has any further questions, I'm going to hand back over to Declan.
Okay, well, I'll just stop the recording.